Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ghoulfriend Hour. I'm your host, your ghost host, Morgan Fezza. And today we have an amazing guest who I just absolutely cannot wait to get into all the fun topics we're going to get into today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Miss Marilynn Hughes. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm happy to be with you.
Yes, yes. So tell our listeners, a little short synopsis about yourself. Who is Marilynn Hughes?
Well, I founded the Out of Body Travel Foundation in 2003 with the goal of reducing spiritual hunger worldwide. I've been experiencing out of body travel and experiences since 1985. And I began journaling those experiences right off the bat. I've written about 140 books. I've done about 9 documentaries, and done a lot of different things with the experiences to, plot out the pathway that has been revealed to me in the spiritual worlds about our spiritual awakening here on Earth and what it is we're here to be doing with that. And so hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And like, how do you really sum up the amazing work that you've done over the years in such a small, like little general synopsis? So it's a good thing we're on a podcast today so we can really deep dive and kind of chat about these things. I know kind of reading about you a little bit, one of the things that I found particularly interesting, especially from a Christian faith, was your initial experience that kind of brought you to this journey. So that's something that if you feel comfortable about, I would love to talk to our listeners about how you got into this and that experience.
The one when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. When I was 9 years old, I had a very beautiful, mind blowing out of body experience that rocked my world. and,
I would say.
and, I was lying in bed, and the clouds started billowing all around and in front of me. They were grayish, bluish, whitish, with specks of darker colors, and they just were billowing. And they parted ways to reveal this marble staircase, which went from earth to heaven. And there was a series of golden angels on both sides of the staircase, all the way from earth to heaven. And at the very top of the staircase were 2 thrones, 2 golden thrones. One had God the Father, and one was God the Son. And I was beckoned to come forward, and I was really overwhelmed because the power of the experience, just the sounds, the sounds of the rumbling in the universe, the thunder, the lightning, it was the rush of energy was so profound and awesome. It's hard to even express. It was, you're literally kind of standing there awestruck. And so I'm beckoned to come forward, and I can barely think or move. And so I walk forward, I come up a few steps, and then I'm taken into a vision within a vision, kind of, so to speak. And in this vision, I am shown a burning cross. It's very huge. It's a very huge burning cross. And I'm told a little bit about my future purpose in life and a vocation that I'll be called to. And that the cross being on fire is representative of this lack of awareness of people trying to put out the awareness of the cross in the world. And I immediately run to the cross that's on fire, and I'm gathering buckets of water, trying to put out the fire on the cross. And it takes a long time to do so, but eventually I put out that fire, and it glows in a great, brilliant light. And God the Father is speaking to me about how basically the the ignorance of the world will be strong, but that part of my purpose will be to put out that fire of ignorance and bring awareness to humanity in some way. And of course, I'm 9 years old, so I'm like, okay, I don't know
You're
what
like,
this
what does that
about.
mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? And what exactly are you talking about? But it's very powerful, and I'm like, okay, uh, you know. But I'm made aware that it's going to be difficult. I'm made aware that I'm going to experience persecution. People are not going to just accept whatever I have to say or believe me right off the bat. And that it's going to be a difficult road, and I'm made aware that it's going to have something to do with the type of experience I am having at this moment, that this kind of experience is going to return to me later in my life, because I'm only 9 years old at the time, and that will have something to do with it. And so I'm coming back from that vision within a vision. I'm at the stairs, and I'm being brought back down the stairs. And of course, the clouds come in billowing and billowing and billowing. And I'm just, in wonder and awe as it comes in. And I am, it's like a big, kind of like this, you're pulled back into your body, and you are immediately back in the physical realm. And I'm basically kind of in a state of, I can't believe that just happened. And it's that, but it's also, wow, I know without question that God exists. You know what I mean? There's no, I always believed in God, but I knew now without question at the age of 9, God exists. Um, and then another thing that happened was I was so excited, I wanted to tell my mother. And I ran to tell my mother, and my mother, of course, didn't believe me. And she was upset with me because she was, don't make things up, don't do that. You know what I mean? And so immediately I became aware of, oh, this is how this sort of thing is going to be received. And this was, a long time ago. I'm 60 years old now. This was when I was 9. And then, the experiences returned to me at the age of 22. And so it's been about 40 years, 38 years or so since they began again in my adulthood. And so when they first returned back to me in my earlier life, which would have been in the early 1980s, these types of things were not nearly as accepted as they are even now. We have much more openness to the spiritual and the paranormal now than we did 40 years ago. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. So I had been warned that I was kind of going to be going against the wind on this. And so I was kind of prepared for that, it was going to be, difficult in that way. It wasn't going to be, you know, just people are just going to accept it right off the bat. I was going to have to do this knowing that there was going to be a lot of pushback for many, many years, and there's still pushback now. But you just do it because what the truth is and what you have seen and what you've been called to do, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's so much to like, I don't think people truly realize how much that is to process at 9 years old.
Right.
Like 9 years old, like you're still a baby. That's such a large experience. So I guess I kind of want to unpack because you said that it returned to you around 22 years old, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really, what was the trajectory point that launched you into writing books and going on this? Was it a soul search? Was it a like were you trying to look for answers to that experience when you were 9? I guess just kind of filling us in, from that initial experience to then when you were 22, did you ever question it in between there? You know, like, was that real? Did that really happen? Is this like, because I just know from my own spiritual experiences, there were so many times when they started when I was a young kid, I would be like, is this real? Like, is this real life? Like, did that really happen? And like, it was always a constant question in the back of my mind. And I was reading books and I was watching shows and I was just trying to grasp at anything, because you're talking about this being, you know, prior to the 80s. And then you said in the 80s when you were 22, right? If I'm getting the timeline correct.
Right.
Even then, like, I know I'm a 90s baby. So knowing in the 90s, this still wasn't, you know, a major thing. And so to think back, you know, in, you said 85, like, that there's not a whole lot of materials, and we didn't have, you know, phones and internet and, you know, all these things right at our fingertips. So it's like, how did you navigate that? I feel like I would have a million questions and very little answers.
Well, you're right. There was very little information about it at that time. But what seemed to instigate it was the birth of my first child. Um, it was shortly after she was born. It was like 3 months after she was born, seemed to be like an instigation point of the experiences returning. And there was never a question about what happened when I was 9. It was that powerful. There was never a moment that I wondered if that really happened or if it was real. It was never a question. And one of the things you'll find about out of body experiences is that they are so powerful. You go into these very powerful experiences, the vibrational states, and these things are so conscious that that you know that they happened. You just do. It's there's really no question to them. You can have other kinds of experiences that might be I don't know if I call them similar, but things, you know, like lucid dreaming and things like that, where you might have more of a question of, well, what does this mean or whatever. But when you have a full blown out of body experience or a true, you know, vision of that nature, you really don't really question it, because it's that powerful and that conscious. But there wasn't a lot of material at that time. And what constituted it in terms of, I just started journaling the experiences that I had. And I realized very quickly that there were patterns that were, you know, unfolding. And I realized that, that there was something there that was worth writing about. And I started pretty quickly receiving instructions on what to write and how to write it. And so, you know, it's funny because every one of my books, the titles were all given to me. You know, all the books that I've written, I've been given a lot of instruction on how to write them, what they should be about, how, you know, and then you're given the actual energetic embodiment of the book in an out of body experience, so that every part of it is coming, you know, from heaven to earth in a sense in those experiences that you're having. And you're given all this assistance. And, you know, so it started out, you know, with, you know, some basic out of body experiences, but very quickly started moving into, you know, journeys where you would be going backward and forward through time, going into past lifetimes, going into what I call timelessness, which would be instigated, ironically, by the initiations into the mysteries and the rites of passage, which actually are experiences that are kind of, let's say, they're rites of passage to take you to higher and higher levels of attainment, to help you to be able to travel to higher and higher spheres of existence and different realms of travel. And these mysteries, you go into these mysteries and you are taken into them for the purpose of attaining to higher knowledge and wisdom, so that you can encompass higher levels of vibration and knowledge. And that's how your soul kind of starts ascending into higher levels of understanding. And it's also how you peel away the mortal sheath, so to speak, the things that you need to start understanding about your own soul, and the things that you need to begin with the path of purification of your own individual soul, the self scrutiny, the intrusive self examination that begins when you have these experiences. So there's so much more. You travel through different types of tunnels and corridors that take you to different types of realms. You go to realms of creation, you go to different planetary existences, you go to the galactic heavens, you go to these mystery worlds, you go to the lands of the masters, you go to heavens, hells, and purgatories. There's so many different worlds that there are that we find out and learn about in our cosmology. When we first experience it, we're thinking, oh, wow, look at this. I've traveled, and we're thinking of, maybe like the astral plane or a few realms here and there. We don't realize there really is this infinity of realms, this whole cosmology of worlds to be discovered and understood out there, that has a lot to teach us as well.
That is absolutely fascinating. I think that's so cool because I feel like the one thing as like a paranormal investigator, and I think this is safe to say about a lot of other paranormal investigators, is we're all searching for some type of answer on universal experiences that we're having. And I want to kind of ask you a question that I like to ask all of my guests when they come on here is, from your wisdom and your experiences and the things that you have now learned, having been in this field for the time that you have, what is your personal belief system? When you talk about these other planetary systems and these worlds and these planes, you know, a lot of us, like in Christian faith, so just kind of speaking from like my own perspective, we're often taught that there's heaven, hell, and that purgatory level. And so it seems like it's much larger than that. So, from what you've experienced and your wisdom, what is your belief system now in this point in time? What have you seen, and what happens to us after we transition?
Well, it's all of that and more is what I would say. It does fit very much into that Catholic Christian understanding of heaven, hell, and purgatory. It fits very, very much into that. Um, Probably the one thing that might be different in terms of like the Catholic view or the Christian view would be that maybe there's not an understanding that there's an infinity of these realms. And so the heavens, there are multiple heavens. The purgatories, there are many purgatories, because the purgatories reflect the many different kinds of dysfunctions that we have as human beings. And then in the hell realms, it's the same. There are many different kinds of hell realms that reflect the many different kinds of darkness and evil that we have that is reflected. Um, and so there's a lot more of that. But then there's also a grander scale to things. Like you're saying, there is more to it. There's more out there. The galactic heavens, like for instance, I often mention that when I go to the heavenly spheres, and I actually have entered into heaven, one of the surprises that I found was that there are extraterrestrials in heaven as well as human souls. And so, and then when you're there, you don't even realize it because it's so normal there that you only realize it when you come back and you're like, wait a minute, there were extraterrestrials in heaven, you know? And so, you know, there's a lot of things that uh, it's because our minds are not as expansive when they're in the physical body, but when we're out in the astral world and then the out of body travel worlds, we go into the higher spheres and we're able to experience these things. um, there's so much in terms of there's cities of light. There's a place called the Pure Lands where all the great masters of all the world traditions gather, and they gather. So, you know, the Avalokiteshvara might be floating around of Buddhist tradition, and many Buddhas and Swamis and yogis, along with the great Christian and Old Testament prophets, and you know the great prophets of the Sikhs and the Jains and the Sufis and the Muslims and Baha'u'llah and Baha'i prophets, um, and all of the other prophets from the Hindu, and all the tribal, the Native Americans, the old ones are all gathered there, and they talk to one another about their work in the redemption worlds. That's what they're called, the worlds that we live in, which are the mortal realms. And that's the worlds that reside in the third and fourth dimensional spheres, where we are battling the good and evil within ourselves and the good and evil around us. And that is a particular kind of construct where a lot of these masters will then still be working with these redemption worlds, and they will gather in these pure lands and communicate with one another about little problems that arise, talk to each other. Well, you know, I've got this problem, what's worked for you? And they will actually, you know, commune and congregate, and they'll gather and scatter back to their planets, the planets that they're working on, where the redemption worlds are taking place and playing out. But there are also other worlds. There are other worlds that are at different levels of evolution than ours. So, you know, I've met with extraterrestrials who live at higher levels than us. I've also had the opportunity to be made aware of extraterrestrials that are actually fairly evil. I haven't been allowed to meet with them for obvious reasons. But I've met with the extraterrestrials who have higher levels, so there are some that work specifically with our planet and our world. So like the Pleiadians, who teach and work with oneness and love and unity of the consciousness. And they work specifically with trying to bring the 7 tones of life into our sphere of knowledge and remembrance. 7 tones of life have to do with virtue, but they have to do with vibration as well. I wrote about that in the Mysteries of the Redemption. But we also have Arcturians, we have Alpha Centaurians, who are a very psychic race. And there are other races as well. There are also races that are not as deeply involved with, like, the earth, but I've been allowed to see their existence and experience it for short periods of time, just so I can see what it's like to have worlds that are evolved far beyond where we are. Because, like I said, we are a mortal world, we are a redemption planet. And so, like, I was taken to experience this wonderful world where these beings are so far evolved beyond life and light, and they live in complete peace and harmony, and their vibration is so beyond what we can even understand, that this extraterrestrial came and he was allowed to touch my arms and I was able to be transported by him holding onto my arms to their planet. And I was allowed to exist there for an hour. And it was
Wow.
just so blissful. It was so beautiful there. Everything was like everything you can imagine, everything being, like everything is a gemstone, so everything in the sky is like diamonds, and it's kind of like crystals and gemstones, and the people's breath is like diamonds because everything is so pure. So think of what is purity and how would that look in a world where everything is purity and brilliance. And that's the
Yeah.
way it was. It was just so beautiful, but it was also ecstatically wonderful because everything was just this ecstatic, brilliant love. And they all lived in such harmony and such wondrous excellence. And it was so far beyond, it was a level of unity, love, and such a high vibration of evolution. I could not fathom it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
when I had to come back, I was so overwhelmed with it. And I was like, please, can I stay? Can I please stay in your world? And of course, the answer is, you wouldn't be compatible there yet. You have a long way to go. It's like, well, yeah, there's that. you know
Yeah. You're like you're like, "Can we just skip a couple levels,
Okay.
please?"
I guess I do have a lot of stuff to work on. There's all that. But there was another race too, and I call them the Tibetans, because these are races where I never was given a location or a name of where they were, but I called them the Tibetans because they shared with me that they worked primarily with people in the Tibetan region of our planet. And for some reason, the people in Tibet were the most able to receive vibration from them. And I don't really know why, but if I were to guess, I would just say because they live in an area where they are so isolated and um, they are they live a quiet way of life, and that the way that they live is unique,
Okay.
and that makes them receptive to this higher vibration. And these beings would come in, and they would gather in groups of 6 or 7 around souls, and they would work with fine tuning individual souls who were receptive to the things that they were able to do. But they were so uh, evolutionarily refined that at the time that I last saw them, I believe they said there were only 5 souls on Earth that were advanced enough for them to work with. And I wasn't one of them. They were just allowing me to see what they were doing. I was not one of them. And so it was a great honor just to be allowed to become aware of that they existed and that they were doing this, and they were allowing me to see these souls who were so unique and so evolutionarily adaptive. And it made me aware of um, just how deeply we have to work at it, in terms of the path of purification.
Yeah.
And if we really wish to achieve some of these heightened states that are available out there, but are a little bit more difficult to achieve. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's funny because you took the question right out of my mouth. I was like listening to you speak about the that one planetary existence where they had all, like you said, it was like gemstones and diamonds, and I'm like I can't even begin to comprehend how hard that must be to come from that back down to the human experience, because I have this conversation with my husband on a daily basis where every day I wake up and I'm like almost scared to pick up my phone or click on any kind of technology, because the amount of just crazy stuff happening in the world, I always say I feel like I'm literally inside that movie Little Nicky, where like his brothers are just wreaking havoc on Earth for the funsies of it. And I'm like, to come from a place where you could see what we could be if we could evolve and transcend and become our highest selves, and to just unify and create that love, like back down, it's like a crash landing, back to
Yes.
earth, to all of this. And I'm like, that has to be such a deep, like, I feel like it would create such an aching,
Yeah.
and that, I mean, that's just my own opinion, but I just feel like just listening to you talk about it, it just gives you this warm and fuzzy. And I'm like, I don't know. It takes a lot of strength to be able to see these places and to get to know these beings, and then like have to come back here and be like, oh my gosh, if only, like, if only we could, get our crap together and like get there, because that, it just sounds amazing. And that's honestly what I hope most human beings strive for, is that unity and that peace and that loving, acceptant, like, energy and vibration, that high vibration. And I think that's what a lot of humans work towards. But the human experience is really rough.
Well, I definitely think too, just having come from the times before all of the internet, social media, and all these things, I think that it's it's uh, it's changed the way that people experience the world, and I do believe that it is a wise thing to consider that we were never really intended to process everything that happens in the world all, every single day, and place ourselves excuse me, in the middle of the fray. And I think that sometimes that has negative psychic impacts on us, and I think that it's not necessarily good for our spiritual life, because when I was younger, we had three networks, and we had one news hour during the day, and we didn't know about every terrible thing that happened in the world to every human being every single day. And it was a little bit more amenable to people actually taking the time to do meditation and prayer, and having the quiet, silent time that would make it a little bit more promising for people, and the time to do spiritual reading, and to do the things that allowed for people to touch into the spiritual world, and to have that contemplative life. And I think that you're right on when you do say that, picking up the phone the first thing in the morning can literally just like derail your whole day. So you have to be somewhat choosy and picky about how you're going to monitor, electronic communications in your daily life, because these things have definitely given us, improvement in our world, but there are definitely also negatives. And for those of us who want to be able to continue to cultivate a spiritual life, we can't forget that the way that that is done has never changed. The last 5,000 years, it's always been done the same. There's nothing new about it. The prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics from throughout time, if you look at all the ancient sacred texts, it's all about the prayer, meditation, the spiritual reading, and the silence. And so we have to find that place where we do turn those things off so that we can actually reach out and be able to communicate and have some kind of relationship with God still.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that. I think that's such wise advice, especially for, even some of our younger listeners, because I always like to bring up and talk about our younger generations, because, like we like to say, the children, they're our future. And I
Yes.
just feel like we have, trying to think of how to say this, we have become, there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of things that are accessible to us about, the metaphysical and spiritual and, all these things. But are we utilizing that properly and respectfully? And I think that, everybody has the capacity to really hone in on their spirituality. And I guess, like, I one of the things that I really loved in that mission statement of reduce spiritual hunger worldwide is, I've never heard it said like that before, but it's true. I feel like there are so many people, our younger generation included, that's walking around spiritually starved.
Yes.
Like, they don't have the right concept of what spirituality is. And
Yes.
the idea of what spirituality is, it's either waving around a sage stick for TikTok, or it's burning Palo Santo, or buying crystals from Sephora, like a makeup store. And I'm like, oh, like, there's just some things where I'm like, Lord, like, it makes you shake your head and you're like, we have to, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but spirituality, we like, it's not about just grabbing these mindless things and this overconsumption, but it's this, like, it's in here, and that's where everything should start, is like right from your core and working on, like, who you are as a person, what you're putting out into the world, how we're helping one another,
Yes.
mindfulness and
Yes.
practicing inner peace and outward love, inward love. Like, I mean, it's become just, I just feel like spirituality has become this mindless kind of um trendy thing, I guess. And it makes me
Yes.
kind of sad because I do feel like everybody, we could reach a really great level of ascension if we could all just, practice actual spirituality and really get in touch with our spiritual sides and listen to that inner voice and our inner beings and our higher beings, I guess, if that's what we call them, if that's the correct term. But yeah. So that's my long and winded opinion, but
Well
it's
said.
hard.
Very well said. I totally agree. And part of that mission statement came from what Mother Teresa said. And Mother Teresa had said that the spiritual poverty in the West was much more severe than the physical poverty in the East. And that touched me so deeply. And I was like, well, we got to do something about that now, don't we?
I
And,
love that. I literally love
yes.
that so much. When I read that, I was like, reduce spiritual hunger. I like that because I don't think enough people think of it as, like, you need food to fuel your body. And, your physical body is important, but so is your spiritual body. And we don't feed that enough. And I think, this is a topic that I wanted to pick your brain on, but talking about realms, and I know that we had touched upon there being some negative entities and some negative, with all the crazy things that we're seeing in the world and a lot of the bad that we're seeing in the world. Do you think that that is because we have a lot of people walking around that are spiritually on like, they're just depleted? And I just, because, like, in my
Yes.
mind, the way that I've kind of made that, I look at people, and I'm a big, I don't know, I'm kind of quirky in the sense that, like, the way that my ADHD connects with people is eyes are very big for me. So, like, I look at somebody and I feel like their eyes are like their gas meter to me. Like, I can look at somebody and say, "Hey, I can tell this person is going through something, like, just they're just not there." Or you can meet somebody and see that they're so full of spirituality and life and love and enjoyment. Like, there's just, it's true. The eyes are the windows to the soul. And like when I look at a lot of people walking around nowadays, you can just see it. Like there's everybody's just null and void of really anything. And it's kind of sad.
Well, it is very sad, and part of it, if I may say, is oftentimes, from my perspective, is that people want a simple, basic spirituality that doesn't require much of them, and a real spiritual path does require some things of us. Um, and I think it comes with a little bit of, spiritual sloth or a little bit of spiritual laziness where we think, well, but I don't want that. I don't want that. I want my spirituality to just be, all joy, happiness, and whatever. I just want it to be simple. I just want it to be that. But the reality is our spiritual paths do require something of us. And what it often requires from us is self-examination and alteration and change. And so we do go through these kinds of things. And part of the way that this is energized and how we actually bring that along, it's by engaging in the prayer and the meditation, but also the proper spiritual reading. And so sometimes people will choose to read the kinds of things that will feed that spiritual laziness. They don't want to read the things that are going to require something of them. So I often guide people to the path of mystical theology, which will lead them to things like St. Francis de Sales, An Introduction to the Devout Life, or St. John of the Cross, The Ascent of Mount Carmel, The Spiritual Life by Father Adolphe Tanqueray, and things like these. There are so many of these amazing texts which will require something of you, but what you don't understand about it is you will be so excited because it will energize your soul in ways that you cannot fathom right now. I can't tell you how many people, when they come to me and they ask me, what do you think I should be reading right now? And I give it some prayer, and then I send them to a particular text, and then they call me or send me an email later, and they are just so on fire. And they're like, I am so happy you told me about this. This book is radically changing my life. And so
that.
when we look at our spiritual path and we're thinking we want it to be simple, we're not realizing that we are actually we're taking something away from ourselves, because there is a spiritual radical life that will do something to your life that will be so meaningful and so useful to you that you will find it worthwhile, even if you do have things that are required of you.
Yeah.
And you'll be happy to give those things that are required of you. And doesn't mean there won't be some struggle with it, because that will happen too. But you'll be okay with it because you're just so happy that you're progressing. Because standing still, no one likes that.
Yeah.
No one is content when they're standing still. They can tell themselves they are, but in the real scheme of things, no one's really content standing still. There is always that emptiness that they feel. I'm supposed to be doing something. I feel like I want to be doing something. When someone hits on something that is really challenging their soul and really driving it forward, they get so excited and they are so energized and so happy. And so part of that is looking at it differently, which is having a spirituality that allows for self examination, intrusive discovery, and being open to doing the things that maybe in the past you haven't been as open to, reading books that you might have thought, I'm not going to read that kind of book, you know, and giving the time to the meditation and the prayer. You know, I'm always recommending to people the 3 hour long meditations because of the fact that if you want to get into the deeper states of consciousness that bring you closer to the vibrational state, these longer terms of meditation, these longer periods are really important for that. And
Yeah.
so making a deeper commitment, you know, and being in the silence. So that's going to be cutting some of these devices off and taking that time to actually live that spiritual life is going to be the kinds of things that you're going to do. And but the payoff when the spiritual life actually ignites, people are always so excited about it and so grateful, and they never regret it. They never regret it.
Yeah, I mean, like I just feel like what's that saying? It's like anything worth having is never easy. So I
Yeah.
feel like anything worth having is worth putting in the work for. Um
Mhm.
so one of the topics that I wanted to kind of get into is when it comes to this is from a paranormal aspect. Some of the paranormal experiences that we have here in you said this was the mortal realm, right?
Mhm.
So, do you have any answers or insight into why my brain is very open to the concept of anything at this point through my own experiences, and although I've never had like a cryptid experience, things like Bigfoot or Mothman, and they may not actually be, what we see or what they have been portrayed to be, but things like cryptid and ghosts and demons and angels, these beings, have you experienced any of them? And if you have, are some of them kind of true to size? Are they what we think they are? Or is it much more complicated? Are they completely different, but this is how we visualize them? Like, there's just always that curiosity of what are we dealing with? And how is their realm kind of either peeking through into our realm, or is it what is happening? What's up?
Well, I have had a lot of experiences with angels and demons and ghosts and lost souls, and I've written specific books about those subjects. Um, I have not I have not had experiences about Sasquatch or cryptids. So those I have not had experiences about, but I am intrigued with what, who they are and stuff. And I've had a couple of friends who are Sasquatch hunters. So I'm always interested in what's going on with all that. But I guess, the question I would have right back at you is, so what is it that you think they are? And I can answer that question better. I think that it's hard to know because a lot of people have different ideas of what angels and demons are and what ghosts and lost souls are. I can give you a general idea, uh, but why don't you tell me? Let's start with ghosts and lost souls. So, what is your experience or perception of what ghosts and lost souls might be?
So I have had a kind of, and I still don't really, I just kind of call it like the gift because I don't really know how to box it or shape it. But ever since I was little, I have had very spiritual experiences. I have seen what I believe are spirits.
Okay.
And I've had, I grew up in a house that I had both positive, but a much heavier, more negative experience with something. And I
Mm-hmm.
still have not been able to define what that thing was. but there was three distinct spirits growing up in my grandparents' house. There was what I believe was a Native American chief. There was a woman probably in her late 30s, early 40s, and her young son, who I believe was anywhere from the age of like 5 to like 7. And I believe that the three entities, the Native American chief, the woman, and her son, were very much still kind of trying to figure out if they were guides, if they were protectors, kind of what their place was. But I just knew that nobody else could see them, but they were a big part of keeping me safe. And I always felt very safe and sound around them. I always felt at peace. And I just never, anytime this kind of darker, heavier entity would terrorize me, there was a lot of experiences with that more negative entity in my grandparents' home. They were always that buffer and that protection. And so they were, I thought maybe they're just residual spirits. And I just really haven't been able to define that. And then just also picking up on spirits, what I believe to be spirits in my everyday life, messages, downloads kind of coming through of things that I don't know how I know. And I couldn't even begin to tell you where it comes from. I still don't 100% understand where it comes from. Um, but I just know that, like, I just have this weird otherworldly connection. And that's kind of what started this whole podcast, was trying to figure out the who, what, when, whys, what, wheres, of what is going on with me and where are these things coming from, and are they actually what I think they are? Like, is it just as simple as these are spirits, or do we go heavier into these are guides or extraterrestrial, or what exactly am I kind of communicating with? And when we set out this equipment and we are talking or getting things through a spirit box, what is the explanation for that?
Okay. Well, what I've experienced has been you do have different categories of souls, and so it's hard to just give you like right off the bat what exactly was each of these. You can have lost souls, and those are souls who have crossed over, who may not realize they've died, or uh, sometimes they do realize they've died, but they're kind of sticking around because they're attached to something here on earth. And a lot of times, lost souls can be perceived as ghosts, and they are ghosts. Sometimes ghosts can also be more than a lost soul. So you can have ghosts can be a lot of different categories because they can be benevolent, they can be all the way up to an evil presence. So there's a whole bunch of variations in between. So lost souls are oftentimes spirits that are in need of assistance to cross over because they somehow got stuck and they need assistance. Ghosts can also be like that. But if you're dealing with a ghost that is actually closer to the darker side or evil, then you can be dealing with something that's a little bit more dangerous. And so that can get more tricky because you can deal with dark forces that can be very dangerous to you. Um, and so that can be very, very different. And so, you can be dealing like with, if you're just talking about being in a graveyard or in a house, you can have just random ghosts and they can actually seem pretty nasty. And then you go meet them like on the other side and realize they're just lost, and you can help them cross over. You can even have quite the battle, but they're just a lost soul. But then you can also have very demonic spirits that you could really have some trouble with, that you could really be putting yourself in harm's way. Now, then, there's also what were called wandering spirits, which are spirits that are wandering the kind of overlapping astral sphere. And those can be anything from souls that are wandering because they're like doing their purgatory on earth. And a lot of times those are going to just be more, they might be kind of scary when you first see them, but they're oftentimes, if they're just doing their purgatory on earth, they're not going to usually be harmful. But then there can also be wandering spirits who are more like tricksters. And so they'd be more like the Heyoka spirits of the Native American, tradition. And so those would be a little bit more troublesome. You can have, uh, you can have other types of souls that can come in that can be, I'm trying to think of all the different kinds of variations in that category, because you can actually end up, so like when you go into a place, like, so for instance, if you go, I'm not sure where do you, can I ask your geographical location?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Delaware, so it's
Oh,
very, yeah, farmy, flat.
okay. All right. And so like if you go to places like where great historical events have happened, like
So like
let's,
Gettysburg.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Like if you went to Gettysburg, you could actually have a place where it would feel like it was really, really haunted, but it might not actually be haunted. It might just be extremely energetically charged because of the battle that took place there,
Okay.
and yet at the same time, you could have all of this energy that's there, but there could also be, a ghost or a lost soul, you know what I mean? So it could be more complicated. Like I'm out in the West, and one of the things you'll find is that there are actually places out West, not a lot of them remain, but there are some where there are still battlefields, some of which have not been completely cleared. So, like in the very far mountains, you might find places where there are, I'm trying not to be really blatant, but there are still bodies, okay,
Yeah.
from like the cavalry days. And
Yeah.
it's just in the real far mountains where, for whatever reason, they're still there.
Yeah.
And so there's things like that where there can be a gathering of like dark energy, and it may have nothing to do with those people, but it has to do with the energy of whatever happened there and the souls that were drawn and attracted to it. And there can be a gathering. There might be 50 or 60 or 100, or it could be nothing. You know what I mean? It can be nothing, but you can have a gathering of souls that are attracted to it, because of something that energetically happened there. There are so many different things that can happen. So going back to your childhood situation, so when you were growing up, you have this chief, you have this young child, and you have this really dark, heavy energy. So based on the way you felt it, I would definitely say that we cannot know for sure until there's something called energetic truth. And you
Yeah.
learn this in the out of body travel state, that you cannot really know what something is until you go out and you are taken into the energetic truth of it. And so you can make these guesses based
Yeah.
on what you have, but you can't really know for sure until you're taken into it and you are shown what is true, which is according to energy and according to God, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
so I can make these educated guesses, so to speak, but that's what they are. That's all they are, is educated guesses. So it's important we understand that. But based on everything that you felt, that heavy energy was most likely something darker, most likely something darker. It's possible it was a ghost or a lost soul that just had a very heavy vibration, And if you went in there and found the energetic truth, it was just a lost soul that needed some special help to be extricated. But it's very possible it was a little bit of a darker force that was there for whatever reason. Not sure if it was related to the house you grew up in or to the land, you
Yeah.
know. Sometimes you can find out, like, even if you live in a new house, you find out, well, what was the land? What happened with this land? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Land is older than time. I say that all the time because there's been so many locations where I've been to, and immediately, they're like, "Oh, the house is haunted. The house is haunted." And I'm like, I have this really funky thing where, especially with hollow ground, it's
Yes.
almost like my body, like, um, it like buzzes. I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like a very like, I say, like, if you use like a power tool for too long and your hand gets that fuzzy feeling,
Yes. Hmm.
if I'm on hollowed ground, my whole body gets that feeling. Or if it's a land tie, if there's something that is like ingrained in the land, or it's something tied to the land, I get that same feeling. So I feel like that's usually how I'll pick it up. And it's funny how many times people are like, "Oh, this house has only been here for a year." And I'm like, it's not, in my head, I'm like, it's not the house. Like,
This
I
could
can
be the
physically
land.
feel.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. Yes, and it's very possible this chief could have been some type of either a spiritual guide or someone who is related to you through past life, um, um, you know, ties, who is acting as, some type of spiritual guide or teacher or protector. But
Yeah.
and it can be a little bit of both, right? So it
Yeah.
can be someone who is acting as a spiritual protector who may be related to you through these past lifetimes. And and I'm getting really slammed now, so I'm just going to go with that. The thought that I was having, and I'm having, and I'm getting really slammed, is that ironically, the very feelings that you get when you touch hallowed ground would indicate that with the Native American, it would be someone you have a special relationship with through past lifetimes. Because it's interesting too, because I also had special holy relationships with some Native American lifetimes. And when I was younger, I had some special work that I had to do regarding sacred holy ground of the native tribes. And so I understand that. And the way he described it is very well described as to what you feel when you're touching sacred ground. Now, for the young child, I think that's more of a difficult one to be sure. That one might be possibly more likely, but like I say, guess, more likely maybe a ghost,
Yeah.
maybe a just a ghost that was there. But that one is just much more hard to guess or to know.
Yeah.
But the Native American chief really feels, and especially the way I got slammed with that, feels like, and this might be someone who might still be around you. That's
Yeah.
the feeling I get.
It's funny that you say that because I had said to a couple of my friends, the further that I've kind of gotten into kind of like my gift and leaning more into my spirituality and through this podcast journey, that I've noticed, like, I've started to kind of take note in a little notebook that I have every location that I've been to, kind of looking into it and seeing what kind of background there is. And I've noticed there's certain locations I've been to that people are like, it's crazy haunted. There's so much going on here. And I step into it, but there's spiritually, I don't connect with it. Like, there's nothing really kind of goes off. And then there's certain locations that I step into, and kind of like you said before, you get slammed. It's just like, I call it my download. Like, things will just start
Right.
coming in left and right. And I just write and I write and I write because I just have to get it out. And
Yes.
will oftentimes find after the fact that there is some kind of indigenous connection there. And I
Right.
often wonder if, that is why there are certain locations that I just feel more connected to and I get heavier downloads with. And I thought it was funny that you kind of said that, because that is something that I've been kind of working on theory wise, of why there's certain locations that I just really like lock into, and others that it's great and I can pick things up, but I'm not as almost like knowledgeable. Like it's almost like I'm coming back to a place that I just know like the back of my hand, even if I've never been there before. And I often find that there's some kind of indigenous ties. And I found out rather recently that I'm Algonquin native. My biological birth father is from Coaticook in Canada.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so yes, and he wasn't in my life. He still isn't really in my life, but being able to kind of learn a little bit from him about our family and being able to connect with then my family over in Canada, I've kept in touch with them and they've kind of told me about our lineage and our family. And it was really awesome to kind of make these connections, because I'm like, okay, maybe I have something here. Maybe there's a who, what, why that I can finally put into, my journal here, that gives me some kind of a light bulb. Like, this is why I am connecting. I don't know.
So, yeah, I was feeling very much that you have um, I really feel that you have strong ties with sorry, um, with some kind of tribes. And I don't think it's just this lifetime, but I do think it's important for you to pursue that with your blood ties. So, did you say, what was the tribe that you said it was?
So I just know that I'm Algonquin native.
Algonquin.
Yeah.
Okay, Algonquin. So, have you ever learned about Blessed Kateri Tekakwitha?
No.
Can I just make this suggestion that you look into her? I,
Yeah.
I feel like you might, um, like that might be something that you might find special for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. She is the first and I believe the only Catholic saint who is a Native American saint in the United States.
Wow.
She's Mohawk, but she's very special.
Okay.
And so I just go ahead and do that and see and tell me what happens. Tell me what happens.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. I'm excited. Yeah, it's been an adventure to kind of and that's why like kind of learning, like I said, doing my research and learning a little bit about you. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is definitely going to require a two-part podcast, because I have so many questions, and just I think it's so neat, like hearing your stories and your experiences, and then now kind of getting to talk to you a little bit about my experiences, and how that translates to you from what you've experienced. And that's one of the biggest reasons I love having this podcast and this platform, because you get to meet so many different walks of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you get to connect these experiences from all over and see what the like likelihood likeliness of each experiences, and then some of the things that I've never heard of before, I've never learned, and it gives me something new to kind of learn and tap into every single day. So I appreciate you so much.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I would love to do a part two and just continue from where we are. I've really enjoyed meeting you, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Yeah.
Yes, yes, likewise. And it'll be good to do a part two, because then I can go and I can learn a little. I might have to have you email me her name again.
Sure, I will. I
Yeah,
will.
just so because I want to dive into this, even tonight. And so I want to kind of dig into it, and then when we, come back for a part two, we could
Okay,
talk about that a little bit.
sure, we'll do
But
it.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so before we kind of wrap up, I know we're kind of leaving our listeners a little open-ended here because there's just so much to talk about, but rest assured, guys, we will be back for a part two, and we can even do a Q&A for some really awesome questions that you guys might have after listening to this. But tell everybody where they can find you, maybe some book recommendations that books that you've written that maybe some beginners can start with, and
Sure.
really just any kind of advice that you have for our listeners.
Sure. You can find us at outofbodytravel.org or astralprojection.co. And I always recommend Come to Wisdom's Door and The Mysteries of the Redemption, How to Have an Out of Body. Well, no. The Mysteries of the Redemption, a treatise on out of body travel and mysticism. And make sure you go to our YouTube page because we have lots of films, and we're just releasing today uh, some screenplays that we are putting to film on the Mysteries of the Redemption.
Yeah.
So check that out too. We got a lot going on. So love to see you there. And always email me, if you got questions. Marilynn Hughes at outofbodytravel.org. I answer everybody.
Oh my gosh, you are awesome. Thank you so, so much again, Marilyn. This has been amazing. And I am eagerly awaiting our part two,
Me
and to
too.
dive into this reading material. So I can't thank you enough for being on here today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was a pleasure.
And as always, everybody, make sure you stay weird, be your weird, wonderful, authentic self. And thanks again for tuning in. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Ghoulfriend Hour. Bye, everybody.